Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Wanda Gray. I'm the Education Manager for Crayola, and I will be your host for today. Thank you so much for joining us for our webinar on Coaching Educators Builds Creative Capacity, which is our topic for today. Today we have three wonderful presenters for you. I'd like to introduce Sherry Sturman, our Director of Education, and joining Sherry today is Kelly Schofield, Principal of Hannah Waltz Elementary School, and Sarah Doherty, Visual Arts Curriculum Coordinator and Turnaround Arts Director in Des Moines, Iowa. And so we are very eager to hear from our presenters. If you have not already done so, I'd like to remind you to please join the free community, Champion Creativity, the Power of Arts Infused Education. By becoming a member, the benefits that you will receive will include invitations to the upcoming webinars that we will be hosting. You will have access to webinar recordings and resources within our library. You will be able to take our CE quizzes and participate in online discussions. So please look at the link at the bottom part of the screen, edweb.net/creativity, to join the community if you have not already done so. For participating in our webinars, EdWeb will send you a certificate of completion, and that certificate will be sent to you within the next business day to the email address that you use to log in to today's session. If you join, or if others join by phone, or if you're watching a recording, you will need to take a brief and simple 4-question quiz to be able to receive your certificate of completion. So please keep that in mind. Okay, I think that's a wrap on that. And Sherry, I'd like to turn the presentation over to you at this time.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
So today we're going to be focusing on coaching as an effective strategy for building creative capacity school-wide. In most of our webinars, we talk about students as learners. But today we're going to focus on an equally important topic, thinking about adult learners and what they have in common with all learners, as well as what's really unique needs and opportunities. So just want to start off by thanking the teachers in Kelly's school for this artwork, this opening photo. This is an example of where they were learning together, and really very much our conversation today about adult learning. So for those of you who participated in the Crayola webinars before, you know that we like to see your thinking, make your thinking visible. And a way that we encourage you to post and share your artwork is with the webinar free giveaway. So I'm just going to bring this up in the beginning so that you can be thinking about the art you're going to create and what you'll be ready to post, and then we'll also remind you at the close. Sketch a piece of art that reflects what you've learned here today, what coaching means to you, what adult learning means to you, and when you post it in the Champion Creativity community, you will receive a free gift of art supplies. The first 50 educators to post their art will receive 12 packs of these 5-count no-drip paint pens. And while we'd love to see your art no matter where you live, shipping this gift is only applicable to participants in the U.S. and Canada. And I did notice as people were signing in, we have some nice international representation here today. Really excited to have you joining us. So we'd like to start our sessions by outlining the objectives. During the next hour, we're going to be talking about understanding adult learners. We're going to be talking about building a collaborative culture, the growth mindset, and helping teachers take informed risks that lead to promising practices. We'll be talking about some coaching protocols. One of the most important is that coaching is really about the other person, and coaching is most effective when there's intentional listening, not telling. We'll go through some exercises so you can see what that means. And then we'll be closing with some thoughts around teacher leaders as advocates. So Kelly's going to start off for us today. Kelly, help us understand adult learners.
Well, I think there's quite a bit out there about adult learners, and we're going to talk a little bit about how adult learners are unique, but also very much like all learners. But starting out with the idea of job-embedded professional learning, just like students have to be practicing in their room and right with constant feedback, adults need that same thing. So job embedded, and there's plenty of research out there, articles, blog posts about how the best and most successful professional learning is job embedded, because it goes along with that idea of all learners. If you look at the art standards or the art design process of creating, performing, reflecting, that constant revision, the same way as the engineering design process, that can't happen outside of the practicing place. So it has to happen where you have the learning happening, just like the students do. Adults need that same thing. So that idea that they can be in their classroom situation, maybe have small pieces of learning and then go apply it, get feedback right there in the moment or pretty close to the moment, and then go back with their revisions is definitely proving to be very effective. And there's definitely some things that are unique to adult learners, but most of what you think about when you're trying to provide professional learning to adults is the same for all learners. That idea that immediate feedback and opportunities to reflect. I mean, that is the same for young learners as it is for adult learners. They want to know right in the moment or right away, am I doing the right thing? How can I make it better? That need for relevance and engagement. Just as all young learners, adult learners need to know, how does this apply to what I'm doing right now? Or how is this going to help me become a better teacher? How is this going to help me pull all of the things that we have to do as educators together? How can you make this idea or this learning fit into everything that I already have to do? Another thing that's very important that we miss sometimes with adult learners is that relationship or the interaction piece. They have to feel a connection. They have to feel, whether you're presenting one time to them or ongoing coaching and learning, they need to know that they are safe, that you are going to take them from where they are to where they want to be able to individualize that for them. So that safe learning environment is very important for adult learners, just as it is for our young learners, and to be able to take risks. And that really that nobody likes to sit and get. Students don't like to sit and get, adults don't like to sit and get. You know, they want to be active, they want to be able to apply it right now to what we're doing. They want to see the relevance, but not in that lecture format. It has to be interactive, collaborative, them being able to share ideas with each other and share ideas with the facilitator or the presenter. Uniquely to adult learners, that makes the learning rich and can really extend it, is that adults have many life experiences that they bring to professional learning. So they maybe have other jobs, they may have hobbies or interests or things that they do on the side. All of that they bring to the table when you're having professional learning, and good facilitators or good instructors are going to be able to use that. They're going to be able to tap in to all the learning that, sorry, my light just went off, all the learning that that adults have done prior to this, and be able to tap into that to make the learning even richer. And adults come with prior experience with professional learning. So they may have had poor experiences, they may have had great experiences, they may have biases against certain things, and they also come with just this, with fears with their own teaching. So if they don't feel like they're good at math, if they don't feel like they're good at art, then we need to work with them on that. So they definitely bring things to the table that are unique to adult learners. A new term that's kind of been thrown out there a lot lately is the lead learner, the principal as the lead learner. And I'm going to say that it is crucial, if not critical, for a principal to take a learning journey alongside the teachers. It was very hard to build anything consistently and pervasively across your school if you are not involved in some way as the principal. It is just, even if it's just to support those teachers, but more importantly, it's to be involved when the learning happens, so you can see possibly those areas where teachers are going to need support with this longer, maybe how you could give them some scaffolds and support, and just really be able to know their fears of something or their frustrations, or who shines in something. And I think that if you're not alongside them and learning with them, and they're not seeing sometimes you even struggle with a content area, then it's very hard to get buy-in, and it's very hard to make something consistent and pervasive across your school. So being involved, your teachers or the people that, the adults that you are teaching to, if they need to see you as a learner also, but it's kind of observing in the field and knowing what's expected and kind of how you can support each individual teacher that really makes a difference in that. Lead listener, wow. So it's often hard for some of us as principals or those in charge of other people to really listen, be active listeners, because we have so much that we want to help people with or we want to fix things, but really being able to listen with intent. So understanding where your teachers are or where those adults are in their learning, kind of really listening to their ideas just as you would with students. Really important to be able to listen to your adult learners, and not just their words, but body language is important when you're coaching or leading adult learners. All of sometimes the unspoken things are really important. So being a good listener is really a basic skill of a principal or a coach. It's a really important area to grow yourself in, because you've got to be able to understand your learners and being able to move them forward.
Sarah, you've got some essential questions for us.
I do. Can you hear me okay?
We can, but it looks like your camera froze. But as long as you're tethered to the sound, you're good to go.
Sounds great. Well, we came up with, when we were kind of discussing this, we talked a little bit about what are those essential questions that we need to know to serve adults. And one of the ones that I see coming up really often in my work with teachers is that difference between being collegial and congenial. And I bet that most of you would agree that anytime you walk into an elementary or a middle school or high school building, there's some congeniality, that people are often super nice to each other, but sometimes that niceness can sabotage the progress of learning or innovation. And so one of the things we like to do as building leaders is to work through that congeniality, which is great, and it's a level of relationship that's important, but to get to collegiality, to kind of build the kind of relationships that can withstand or maybe even thrive on the kind of questioning that helps us get to the root of what matters most, and that's innovative education with children. Another essential question that we have to ask ourselves is about how we build that collaborative expertise. It's more than just aligning or more than just agreeing to hand off the students at 10 a.m. on Monday morning. Collaboration is about really intentional practices. And so one of the things you want to think about adults is they, as we were already talking about earlier, needing to be taught explicitly those collaboration skills. What does it look like to collaborate? What does it sound like? And to get to a place of shared practice where successes and failures are both shared. And that goes beyond the working together, and that really gets down to collaboration. And then finally, this kind of overarching idea of camaraderie, this idea of being in it together as comrades, really. And that's part of building community through shared risk and really understanding change agency. And with, when you develop a sense of camaraderie, change and growth becomes not something necessarily to be endured, but leveraged for greater school health and student learning. So we kind of looked at these three things as being essential questions to building this culture: the collegiality, the moving from nice to need to know together, the idea of collaboration and building that camaraderie. So we know that humans are always learning, of course, and we know coaching happens everywhere. We sometimes forget about those really important coaching moments that don't look like a formal PLC. So some of them can be really spontaneous. One of the ways that we've worked in some of our buildings is to make sure we know where adults gather socially. So there might be a point of learning and a point of feedback in somewhere, say like the cafeteria, or even in the bathrooms, where we know adults might have a moment to breathe and think outside of the formal PLC or PD session, right? This is a picture of one of those moments. This was a more planned moment that included a lot of joy, just like those more spontaneous ones, asking teachers to interact with their learning in the same way that we'd want kids to interact. So we know that part of getting deeper than just kind of a one-off warm-up can be something that connects the adults in their classrooms, or outside of their classrooms. So we think about story sharing, and we know that we can break down that congeniality and build collegiality when we know more about the people we're working with and we understand their perspectives. And that can help us reduce biases that are inherent in all humans when we spend time understanding the perspective of others and the others we work with. And that helps us just by story sharing. How do you see situations? How do you see students in your classroom? How do you see art? We know that hope is not a strategy, and that's why intentional planning is critical. Collaboration is not necessarily a natural reaction to the kind of work that we do. And so we know that as leaders, in order to build this creative culture, we've got to create systems for it to thrive, and that means bringing people together with real intention. And then, of course, making celebrations visible. I actually was just out in a series of classrooms, elementary classrooms this morning, and I got to see in a perspective that other teachers don't get to see this great thing happening with viable and guaranteed curriculum across all of our art classrooms. And I really thought about this slide and coming together with you today because I need to share that story with teachers as their leader. And I need to plan to do that intentionally because they can't celebrate each other's successes unless, someone with that level of viewpoint points them out. And so as I was reflecting on my way back to the office to do this today, I thought, well, that really fits about, I'm living that purpose of seeing the situations with a new lens and being able to share that lens so we can celebrate the progress that we've made through establishing this kind of creative culture. So we also know that risk-taking is really important. And something interesting happens when you go through something with somebody else that sort of gets to the edges of an uncomfortableness, but one that's productive and positive. So that helps us as we build this culture of risk-taking, make failure a critical part of learning, not just for kids, but also for the adults that we work with. And so if we make risk safe and the results of a failure from a risk taken also safe, it can really help build that kind of climate and culture that leads to that sharing moment. I wrote a note to myself when I was thinking about this the other day about setting the safety net. We as adults need to set the safety net for each other for productive struggle rather than prescriptive motions. It has to be okay to veer off the beaten path, but it's also up to us as leaders to help define what's tight and loose for our teachers and our learning communities. And of course, I don't think this conversation would be complete unless we talked a little bit about mindset. I don't always know if teachers feel the kind of agency and efficacy that they truly have. And I think about some of my favorite education researchers talking about knowing thy impact. As leaders, helping teachers to understand the impact when they innovate and take risks is so important. And it asks us to ask a few questions of both ourselves, our teachers, and then our students as well about who owns the work, who is responsible for that, and who has the capabilities to move it forward. So we know that growth mindset is critical not just for children, but also instilling that in adults, to know that adults can grow and get better and learn, and that even sometimes creative pursuits are possible where one might not have thought in the past.
Great, thank you. So I'm really glad that you brought up a wide range of places that coaching can occur, right? Because coaching conversations happen in so many situations, both those planned, formal, and the informal. So think of the hallway chat that you have, or even as seen in the image here, after students have left for the day, two teachers, communicating about some of the work and what they're observing. So I love that you talked about the social gatherings, because when we can weave in these important conversations wherever teachers gather, that can really help to reinforce it. So we should be thinking of coaching as really any opportunity to interact with each other, and that it doesn't have to be that formal time that you sit down one-on-one. Certainly those are some very rich, deep conversations, but we know a lot happens in the parking lot, happens in the hallway, in a conversation that you hadn't necessarily anticipated, but you were so appreciative that it occurred. So we tend to think of PLCs, the professional learning community, these team meetings, whether they're vertical teams, horizontal teams. We think of professional development workshops, and all of that is rich with coaching, but so are some of these other more informal pieces. And the main point we want to make is that regardless of the venue, how long it took, where it was, how far in advance you had planned it, regardless of where the coaching occurs, the most effective coaching is intentional listening, not telling. And one of the most important phrases that I love to keep front of mind is the one on top of this image. Coaching is about the other person. It can't be about the coach. It has to be about the other person, right? And that's because coaches don't solve other people's problems for them. Coaches can help teachers discover new approaches. They can help them take informed risks. They can help them lead to some promising practices, but only when that other person has their own epiphany and solves their own problem. And so one of the things that helps us keep that in mind, that coaching is about the other person, is to think about coaching conversations along a continuum. And we angled this arrow sort of up and down to show sort of the lowest level of conversations to the highest, the most productive kinds of conversations. And you can see those three kinds of conversations punctuated there, because the type of conversation really matters. So the lowest form is telling. That sort of in-between space doesn't do such harm but doesn't do so much good is the sharing. And then where the real magic happens is at the top, the intentional listening. So let's take a look at what that means. So intentional listening is when the coach really trusts the other person and is a sounding board and really helps to play back what they think they're hearing. But it's more about listening and what's going on in the other person's mind than it is in the coach. So some examples are, I know you'll figure this out, or would you like us to brainstorm some possibilities? So you can contribute ideas, but you're not driving it. Or reflect on what you observe. I see the disappointment on your face, right? Or just really asking, what are you thinking of doing? So good kinds of idea starters for that intentional listening. And you can tell from all of those, it's really about the other person. Now, sharing. So we've all experienced this, right? Just think about a time, it's happened to all of us, where you've got a problem and you want somebody to listen, and instead that other person is so eager to jump in and tell you, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. This happened to me too. Let me tell you what we did, or I completely understand. Well, it's well-meaning, right? They don't mean to be taking over, but it's not very helpful. So some examples of that, right? Oh, I understand. That happened to me too. Or we had a similar situation in my other school. Or let me tell you a story about when we, yeah? So I'm sure there's going to be some sort of connection point, and, you know, there is something to be said for that sense of, you know, you're not the first one who's been down this path. But it really isn't helping the other person feel heard, and it certainly isn't helping them extract their solution. Now, telling. Telling is the least effective kind of coaching because nobody wants another person to tell them what to do, and nobody wants somebody else to solve their problems for them. Now, you sometimes hear these sort of couched in other words, but they're still telling, right? So think about when somebody's come in and said, well, I recommend, or they might even couch it a little bit like, the best advice that I ever received was, or they might make it sort of collective, you know, well, what we're trying to do here is, and one of the most insulting or, prescriptive is, you know, sort of challenge the person. Well, why did you do that? And even if it's said a bit softer, like with real intent for inquiry, like, help me understand why you did that. There's still this sense that the other person, you've got a better solution. And some of the telling is very pointed and says, wouldn't it work better if you, right? And you can tell that difference. Just look at this scale at how demeaning those telling answers are, right? You don't trust me to know the situation better than you are. You've only known about this situation for the few nanoseconds that we were discussing it, versus, oh, you're going to make an assumption, you're going to share your story instead of listening to mine, versus that real intentional listening. You put the ball back in the other person's court. So remember in the beginning we said that nobody wants to sit and get? We are going to urge all of you to become active participants and to use this slide as a jumping board, as an exercise, to type some messages in the text box. I want to see that text box just flying off the page here. So we'd like each of the participants to reflect on a coaching conversation. And if you were to replay that conversation right now in the text box, tell us how it's going to be different now that you're thinking about intentional listening. So start typing us. What's an example of some coaching you experienced, and how would you flip it from somebody telling you what to do, or maybe think about yourself as a coach, maybe a time you thought you were helping by sharing a similar story, and flip it. Flip it to where you're intentionally listening. Thank you, Mary Jo, for taking the start here. So yes, this is very similar to a situational leadership, because leadership really does vary by situation and thinking about the other person. Oh, you use an interesting framework for whys. Thank you, Nikki. Tell us a little bit about your 5 whys. Great. And others, keep typing. That text box should be flying right now, in the spirit of making sure that the webinar is hearing you and that we are listening to you. Okay, so silence. Oh, that's going so fast. I just want to go back and see for a moment what someone just said. Silence makes you nervous and you want to jump in. So you're going to urge yourself to be more comfortable with the silence. Thank you, Lauren. Absolutely. Oh, I love this idea, Penny. Videotaping, and then you can look together at the video. And now it's so easy with the phone, right? Kelly and I have been talking about that a lot. Yeah. You just hold a phone up. It's pretty non-threatening. And then it sometimes helpful that the other person see it first, and then you look at it together, right? Just gives them a little bit of safety if they got to see it first. Yep, stepping back from telling and doing more listening. Absolutely. I love that, Carrie. You remember that as a coach, you don't have to know everything. And actually, I'd even go a bit deeper on that. I'd say that a coach knows that the answer lies within the other person. And if we help them think it through, ask them those essential questions, the answer lies within the other. Great. Oh, a nod. Okay, so you reinforce the listening by nodding and continuing to encourage them to talk. Okay, great. Great. And so asking them how they feel. Sometimes the emotions, we have to get at the emotions before we get at the thought. I love that. Absolutely love that. Good. So thank you for sharing. As they come to you, keep going, but we will move now, and Kelly's got the next slide. But we really want you to keep sharing your thoughts throughout. This is not a sit and get. This is a participate, and we will respond to your comments because you are driving this with your text box. There you go, Kelly.
Hey, that was I love reading all the comments over here. I'm learning some things myself, and just when I'm getting ready to speak, my light goes off. Sorry. All right. So I think many of you, if you're coaches or you're teacher leaders, if you're on this webinar, I'm sure you're a teacher leader, somebody wanting to improve yourself and your school, and that takes a lot of collaboration and a lot of the intentional listening that we're talking about and the coaching, because we all coach each other, whether we're an official coach or a principal. We're all in situations daily where we're coaching somebody, whether that's our teammate or the teacher across the halls coming over with an issue in their classroom. So understanding and kind of reflecting on these questions about coaching and collaboration are really important to make school-wide change. I've been lucky enough to be in 2 different schools in 2 different states and kind of seeing how increasing teacher collaboration and real collaboration can impact student collaboration. So thinking about creating that culture where multiple access points are given to adults and students. So their ideas are valued, you understand that people learn differently, and that happens in collaboration. Conversations in the hallway, conversations like Sarah was talking about in the social places, conversations with students, conversations with parents. Really listening and with understanding, not to fix something or to solve a problem, but knowing when it is just about fixing something and solving the problem and helping that person do it. So collaboration and connecting, what I call connectivity, are really important things to a school, but also to relationships. And we all know that schools, classrooms, students, teachers, they're not going to grow without that relationship, the relationship with their leaders, with their coaches, with their administrators, but with each other. Those things are all really important. So the more we engage teachers in meaningful collaboration and just rich dialogue, but also the more we listen to them, because listening is part of communicating and collaborating. So the more we're listening with intent, trying to bring out the best in everybody, building on what they bring to the table and helping them come up with the solutions. That culture that you build with your teacher leaders is going to bleed over into the classroom. And that same, the same way that you are working with your teachers as a coach or as the principal, as the lead learner, or we like to call it the chief creative officer at Crayola, that is going to happen, and the teachers you're modeling it with them, you're using those strategies and those techniques with them. That's going to go right into the classroom, and they're going to understand that when they feel like they have a voice, when you are supporting them to grow themselves and not be just compliant to what you want them to do, then those are the same strategies and the same things that they will take to the classroom, because they will understand it, and they will be able to, teachers will be able to understand that growth mindset when it works with them and be able to share that in their classrooms as well. And then you've not just created collaborative teachers in their PLCs or in their workspaces, in the planning room or in the hallway conversation, but you've created just a culture of collaboration, real collaboration, where problems can be discussed, people feel valued, and people feel listened to. So it starts definitely with the coaches and the leaders, creating that collaborative culture with their teachers, and then that's going to go all the way through the school, and not just to impact the students, but it's going to impact your parent community as well, because it's going to be all your stakeholders are going to feel valued and part of that school decision making, but also that collaboration. So there's multiple ways to connect and collaborate. And it all starts with listening.
So we always think about, well, all of us come, I guess, to this process from a different vantage point. And I think Sherry pointed out that there are people who are filling all kinds of roles in education joining us today. And really, I'm so glad that Kelly pointed out, has brought culture to the table here. And that culture, while we know the principal is often the culture set up for a building, that doesn't just have to start there or end there. And so if you're thinking about how we build creative capacity in a school, that can be with a colleague. So if you're a coach or a teacher and you're interested in really building this creative capacity and this expertise around collaboration for increasing student achievement, you can set a culture with one other person and take a risk together. You can start a relationship with that person that values some healthy pushback, that allows for someone to ask some of those coaching questions of each other. And, you know, power dynamics will always play into that. But what Kelly was talking about, the listening, and as a leader becoming a listener, you can sort of balance out the power dynamics and allow teachers and practitioners to become experts in practice and you to become the learner as you collaborate together. And through that process, when you're asking a teacher to take a risk, or a teacher is considering an instructional strategy that might feel like a risk, they're more likely to carry that out knowing that your relationship is collegial and collaborative and not ending at evaluative. So building those collegial relationships and scaling that out is really important. And that might be starting with a coach and a teacher relationship, and then building to a coach and a teacher-team relationship, and ever widening those circles and influence until, you know, we talk about efficacy, you've changed the culture of your school to build this creative capacity into learning. And then part of that, and we've already kind of touched on it too, is sharing stories about your risk taking. And that can happen at the teacher level, but it's often really powerful when the building leader kind of shares a risk through that storytelling and says, I tried this, it didn't work, here's what I did in response, or crowdsources solutions and asks the teachers to coach them. What should I have done, or what should I do next? And sort of build that as part of the fabric of the way business gets done and creativity gets supported in a school. The other thing that I really think is critical to building this kind of culture is understanding personal efficacy and believing with that growth mindset that you have the ability to change not just an individual student's life, which if that were alone the purpose, what a tremendous honor, but that we have the power to change a school or to change the way school is experienced for both kids and adults. And so I think often our job is to build that sense of personal efficacy in teachers. And then once that fire is lit, use creative capacity or use that creative collaboration to build their capacity to see the work through. And so it often starts with mindset. And sometimes when we're working on creating change in buildings and getting teachers to engage in an experience that's maybe slightly uncomfortable, maybe opens up some creative gates that are new for them, we go right to capacity building and we forget about why this can make you have more impact. And so starting with efficacy and mindset, then building those skills. And with growth mindset, we know we can always keep learning. It's really about getting that culture in place, that mindset in place, and then identifying those discrete skills. And like Kelly was saying, supporting teachers in getting there. I'm here, you want to be there, let's work on what are the steps that makes that happen. And all of those things can be done not just at a building leader teacher relationship, but can be a teacher-teacher relationship, a coach-coach relationship. Those things, I think, do not have to happen in the linear sort of hierarchy that we often assign them. That building creative capacity is a collegial pursuit at all levels and across all levels.
That was beautiful. In fact, I was just looking at some of the comments that came across on the wall. You're absolutely right when you added the text that the collaboration is much deeper than cooperation. And we were talking earlier about it's not just agreeing to schedules and deadlines. It's really about working together to help each other be more successful, right? Working towards another person's success. So thank you for sharing that. And so please, you're joining us from New South Wales. Thank you. So we've been talking a lot about conversations, coaching conversations. And we're going to shift gears here a little bit because conversations, coaching is definitely a conversation, but it's so much more, right? So when you think about coaching, what else is involved besides that dialogue between others that helps them find more common ground and alignment? So let's think about beyond conversation. And to start this, we'd like you to get busy with the text chat, become interactive, right? This is the part where you don't just sit and get. We'd like you to start typing in for some minutes. What does oasis mean to you? You think of the word oasis, or you might be inspired by this piece of child artwork titled Oasis. What does oasis mean to you? Refreshing, relaxing. Keep going on what oasis means. Peaceful, safe space, absolutely safe, right? Calm, tranquility, peaceful, encouraging. Okay, great. Thank you. Has anybody said, it's going fast, has anybody said nourishing, right? An oasis in the desert could be a fertile spot where everyone grows, right? A place you want to be. Great, that's great. So we also like to think of it as a place of refuge. If you think about in a desert that's pretty hostile, this could be a place of refuge, relief, affirming. And when you look at the photo, you see that an oasis forms a natural community. Yes, interdependence, beautiful. So there's like a natural community that goes to be nourished, right, nurturing, good. So we like our protocols to be built as acronyms because we believe that, and those of you who watched other webinars before know that we often pick a word and build a protocol with an acronym because it truly helps to make it more memorable. Rejuvenating, I'm seeing, right? Secure, life-giving, beautiful. Okay, so thank you for sharing what OASIS means to you, and let's look at how OASIS can be a coaching protocol. This is something that Crayola has developed, and we teach more deeply when we go into our full professional development. But we take each letter in the word OASIS, and we formed it around the coaching protocol. So the O is observe. And when colleagues get the opportunity to see each other teach and become a lens, a window, a mirror on what's going on, another set of eyes and ears to help each other see the learning that's going on in the classroom. And when you, as a coach, go in and observe a colleague, focus on the students for evidence of engaged learning so that the person you're observing doesn't get nervous, oh my goodness, what are they going to look for, feeling vulnerable. When they know that what the coach is looking for is evidence of student learning, that helps to make it very clear and very intentional in that observation. It's a great feedback tool. The A in OASIS is align. That's about collaboratively agreeing on a common vision and teaching strategy. So this alignment can really stretch through the whole process of coaching, right? You align on why coaching is important. You align on what you'd like to observe, what the purpose of the lesson is, what you want the students to gain. You align on why a student-centered teaching strategy is important. You align on a common vision. That alignment and having that set up before the observation can be an important part of this coaching protocol, right? So we like to call that the no surprises part. Yes, there's certainly going to always be some wonderful delights that children come up with that we would never imagine. But in terms of the intent, and how that observation is going to go, no one is going to feel threatened by that. You actually know why the other person is coming in and observing. S, self-reflect. This is my favorite one. Before a coach should say anything, they need to self-reflect about what that experience felt like, not only to them, but from multiple perspectives. And we tend to want to focus on the student perspective, right? The two adults are going to talk about their perspective, but extract as much evidence as you can from the student perspective and reflect on that before giving any comments or feedback. I, impact. It's important to discuss the impact on learning, engagement, culture. I love what Sarah just talked about before of teachers really appreciating the impact they have on so many lives. And when that coaching conversation talks about impact, it elevates it to the purpose of this profession. F, scaffold. We talk about scaffolding learning for children all the time, right? It is a really important concept when coaches work with adults. Build upon the experiences. Build upon your last conversation you had, whether it was a parking lot or a hallway conversation. Build upon this shared observation experience. Build upon the insights that you have in the discussion, and let that experience, this coaching protocol, guide the next step. What would the person that you're coaching like to try next? And let that person guide that scaffolding. Does that make sense? That it would build with that other person's framework. So, just one, I'm going to toss it back to Sarah. So what we encourage is many of you might want to, when you post your artwork, you might want to post your version of coaching in general, or you might want to build upon the OASIS protocol, which is something that Crayola goes into schools and offers that training on. Okay, Sarah, you've got the next slide.
Well, I think I was just having a really great conversation the other day with a colleague about how sort of, Kelly, close your ears, that leadership in education is sometimes a dirty word, right? And that we sometimes think that if you're acting as a leader in your building, you're somehow missing out on your true purpose for teaching or with children, or you're abandoning a team or something like that. And I think that's really an old model of leadership. And there are lots of ways for teachers to lead, and that they can do that by not leaving a classroom, and that's absolutely just as honorable and effective as other forms of leadership in education. And it's really about learning kind of skill sets and where you feel like you have impact. And so there's an enormous spectrum of leading. So the question there is posed about what does it mean to lead? And I think leading means innovation and risk-taking, and knowing how to bring others along with you. Because often, especially in this work that we're talking about, this creative capacity, narrow bands of excellence are built and never diffused. And so while a teacher may really be digging into some incredible innovative work, to be a leader means to share that work with others and to bring them on board. I saw someone in the chat box talked about teachers failing to toot their own horn. That's exactly right. And so if you are in a role of leadership, it might be part of your job as a coach or a building leader to provide pathways of horn tooting that's not necessarily uncomfortable. And you might ask teachers, how do you like to be recognized? And you can start to build your sort of portfolio of the way people might want to lead in your building. The question about how teacher leaders can be advocates is one of my favorites. And one is that we have to agree, and I think, again, someone in the chat box mentioned, we have to agree that the end all of our business is student learning and achievement. And so the vision can remain solid and unchanged while the pathway might change. And so leadership is about helping people discover that pathway, but the shared vision would be clear. And how do we provide ownership in that vision? We've talked a lot today about agency and efficacy, and that's part of that. But also to drive the change without relenting. And when I say drive the change, that means to not be afraid to let go of things that don't help you get to that vision. And that's part of having collegial conversations and even doing things like setting norms and speaking your truth. And driving change on the path to that vision means setting up a culture where you have that collegiality, where you can say, I don't think we should do that because, or I wonder if this aligns to our vision. And then, of course, the collaborative decision-making process. Of course, it's going to be difficult to engender that efficacy and that ownership in the work if you come in so late that it's become a compliance measure without getting the commitment down. And so the way to get people to commit to building-wide change or some sort of like ambitious instruction that has been missing is to make sure that teachers are at the table. All stakeholders really are at the table in articulating that vision and setting some points along the path. So I guess the idea of leadership is wide-ranging, but it requires all kinds of leaders to get to that vision together.
Okay, so this is another opportunity for you to be active. This time, it's not your fingers in a text chat box, but actually doing a hands-on art project. I saw a few minutes ago someone was having a dialogue in the text chat about how lovely it is that when we look at children's artwork, we can see the world through their lens. And a lot of our Crayola sessions, we talk about make your thinking visible. Children's minds, we can see what children are thinking when we look at the art, and the same is true when we're working with adult learners. So we're going to urge you now to create. We're going to actually use the 4 artistic processes that the new art standards are built around. Create and then present through the library, respond to each other, and connect. So share visually your thoughts about coaching or teacher leadership. As Sarah was saying, teacher leadership does not have to be a traditional model or a hierarchical model. So a visual that you create might show that. Connect your thoughts between what we talked about in the beginning of the webinar, those adult learning principles and what it takes to really be relevant for an adult learner, and connect that to this collaborative school culture that we've been talking about. So some examples that show you how others who have done this exercise have shared with us. You can see here on the left, a person talked about coaching as being this multi-layered piece where there's a vision in the center that really connects that sort of that central focus. And yet you can see that there's students and teachers and lots of collaborators and stakeholders that are a part of that overall vision. You can see on the upper left-hand piece, people have thought about coaching as sort of putting together a puzzle and helping the puzzle pieces fall into place. And so I think, there's a variety of images. The one on the bottom talks about the learning environment being this overall encompassing piece that impacts collaboration and leadership. So a visual can often help us see what you're thinking. And in the EdWeb Champion Creativity community, you will find the library. You will receive instructions on how to post when you join the community. And it's a great way for you to present your thoughts and to connect. And you can see someone has included an image of leadership. It's an interesting kind of leader, urging colleagues to throw their ideas in the hat, so to speak, the proverbial throw yourself in the hat. And I love the one that's spiral and interconnected up on the top that really talks about this thoughtful collaboration, this piece that shows that working together is more than just aligning calendars, but actually coming together as this very organic piece. So for those of you who haven't done it before, just want to remind you, first 50 educators who post their artwork do receive 12 packs of the 5-count paint pens. They are really delicious to work with. They are so much fun. I'm so thrilled that we have people from all over the world joining the webinar. Due to shipping restrictions, this gift can only be sent to participants from the U.S. and Canada, but we would love to see artwork from anyone. So please be sure to post the work. And Diane, I know you're going to be sending us some. Oh, you sent us some questions. All right, I just have to unlock my questions, right? So for the Q&A, okay. So the first question, I'll start it off, and then Kelly, I think you might want to build on it. When we were talking about adult learners as different from other learners, and one of the points was how adults have such diverse, rich, deep prior learning. Someone wrote a very wise question, which is, don't children also bring their life experiences to learning? And of course, the answer is yes, they do. I think the only difference is the adults have a much longer, right? They have many more years, and so that provides some perspective and some balance in it. But do you want to address how children also bring their life experiences to learning?
Absolutely. I read that comment, and I thought, we certainly, there are so few things that make adult learners different than young learners that it really is hard to find something that you couldn't connect and make a case for young learners. But yes, they bring their backgrounds, and they also bring their biases, and their experiences they've had that were possibly not positive, So we do have to really make sure that we cherish all of that and bring it and make it part of our learning. And that goes kind of back to that listening. I always say that we as humans, we're not hardwired like computers. So all of our sort of learning and communication is filtered through our listening. So being able to listen to those experiences and understand them, students or teachers, is powerful in making whatever learning we're doing and building that circle of trust.
Great. Sarah, I know that was a really fun journey following you down the hall. I have to say, that was like a first for a webinar. I loved it. So glad you're settled again. And here's, there you go. So this question is geared to you. It says, how do you get teachers to feel they have the power to make that positive change? The person adds a note saying, my school has a lot of teachers that say, we already tried it, it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And I know that in your role, you hear that a lot, and you've got some great responses to turn that into a positive.
Absolutely. I think what we fail to do sometimes is to identify some success criteria. So when we're planning something, we might say, how will I know that I'm making a difference? What will it look like in our school? What will it sound like in our school? What will be the visual evidence that we are enacting this change? Because it can be pretty subtle, especially in your day-to-day when you're, managing 1,000 things and doing 20 wonderful things for kids at every hour, that you might forget to look for the indicators. And so that might mean, as a coach, setting that clear success criteria with the person you're coaching and say, what will it look like? And then you can look for it together, because you're right, you can be blind to it when you're in the midst. And so then as a coach, you might be able to say, oh, I can see this happening in our building, or I can see this happening in your classroom. Did you see it? And we kind of have to condition ourselves to start looking for those things, those indicators that the change is happening slowly by slowly. And also, we have to agree upon what success looks like over time. Are we talking about a change we want to see tomorrow, a change we want to see in 6 months, a change we want to see in 3 years in our building? And so we all have to kind of agree and calibrate on the scope of the change and what it'll look like and feel like, and help each other recognize it. I think that leads to teachers feeling like they see it happening as a direct result of their actions.
Great. So it's not so overwhelming. It's actually some bite-sized pieces that you can point to as steps along the way. Perfect.
Yeah, and if you can feel it, kids, families can feel it.
Kelly, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I was thinking about that whole idea of reflection and questioning and coaching. So when you get those teachers that say, I've done this before, it doesn't work, that's just another opportunity for you to use those coaching tools to really listen and find out, what did you try? What didn't work about it? You know, what were the criteria, like Sarah was talking about, that we wanted to get at, and why maybe it didn't happen? Because classroom to classroom, year to year, school to school, things are all different. And we might have tried something in one situation that didn't work, and we want to throw it out completely. And so I think that those comments come to us. That's when the real coaching starts. So we really have to be able to take those people and show them that they can have a small success, which will lead to a greater success.
I love that you're saying that. Sometimes it's so frustrating to us when people say, tried it, been there, done that, doesn't work. And what you're saying is listen to them. Find out why they felt that way. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like, as a coach, hold back our frustration that's an answer we hear so often, and use this again as another intentional listening opportunity. So thank you for reminding us of that.
And kind of going off.
A question about, yes, go ahead.
I was thinking, going back to that idea that we can all be coaches, even if it's not our title. So, those kind of conversations, if we can really build that culture in our school where we're all helping each other grow, then it might just be the teacher next door that's helping me see that I might have done that before, but here's a way I could do it differently. So it just goes back to building that.
I love that. Great. Yeah, coach doesn't have to be in our job title. Coach is what every interaction is about. Love that. Right. So there's a question I'd like to tease into two parts. Someone was asking about our essential questions, and I would just like to clarify that we always start our webinars by posting some essential questions that we think are good springboards for the webinar, right? Things to think about. We don't have a prescriptive answer. We don't have necessarily an idea in mind of where it's going to go. It's to help you think about the application of these insights for your work. So, but you're asking if our essential questions are our definition of the community of practice, and I just wanted to clarify how we use essential questions, but then also break this into two parts, because Sarah, you were talking about community of practice quite a bit, and so it might be helpful for you to share what your definition or thought of as community of practice.
Yeah, so I think kind of the essential questions for me sort of had me thinking, what are the conditions necessary for that community of practice? And when I just think of a community of practice, I think of a group of people coming together with the same purpose. And that reaching that purpose is much more meaningful and effective when that practice is shared together. So that could be anything from an entire building to your grade level PLC, where you're doing something very standards focused and driven to plan instruction. But I think that anytime you're coming together to do common work to a common vision, that can be your community of practice. And those essential questions just start to ask us, what conditions are necessary for those communities to accomplish their goals and live their purpose?
Cool. All right, I know we're already past the end. Let's move to, we always like people to focus on their next steps. Jot down, you can either do it in the text box or just on a piece of paper that you hold on to, what ideas stick that you plan on using in your school. How will the insights from today influence how you coach and collaborate with colleagues? And then the OASIS protocol is just a taste of what we offer in our PD. How would you share some of the insights around the OASIS protocol and intentional listening with your colleagues and students? As I mentioned, this is just a taste. If you would like more information about the creative leadership, professional development that we offer in schools, you can email creativelylive@crayola.com. This is professional development that we do take into school districts. And Wanda, take it away. Talk about getting the certificate.
I am here. Okay, just as a reminder, You will receive a certificate of completion for participating in today's webinar. It will be sent to you to the email address that you used today within the next business day. And just a quick reminder about if you're joining these webinars by phone or watching the recording, you would just have to take a brief quiz to access or actually to receive your certificate of completion. Also, just want to remind you to join the Champion Creativity, the Power of Art Infused Education community. That way you will be informed of upcoming webinars, as well as to be able to gain access to our resources from the webinars, access those CE quizzes, and participate in discussions. And at this time, I would like to thank our presenters, Sherry, Sarah, and Kelly, for today's presentation, and remind you that our next Crayola webinar is May 17th. Today we talked about coaching and teacher leadership, and the focus of May 17th's webinar will be all about building student leadership capacity. So please join in for that on the 17th. We thank you very, very much for joining us today and hope to see you next time. Thank you.